Great. So welcome everyone. This is our final session in this Employability Week. And as the title suggests, we're going to be focusing on legal careers and government today. And I'm delighted that we're joined today by Hannah Fleetwood-Read, who is a senior government lawyer in the government legal department. My name, just in case you don't know, is Kate Ritchie, and I am module team chair for one of the SQE modules, W323, which is business law and dispute resolution. And I'm also on the Open Justice team and the W360 team as well. But as I say, we're going to hear from Hannah today. So I'm going to ask a few questions of Hannah to find out more about what being a government lawyer involves, and then you'll have a chance also to ask questions in this JP, so do feel free to post in the Q&A box, and we'll keep an eye on that and raise those with Hannah at the end. So without further ado, welcome Hannah, it's lovely to meet you, and perhaps we could start by just, if you could tell us a little bit about how your background and your route into a legal career with the government legal department.
Of course. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for everybody who has arrived at Friday lunchtime on the last day of your Employability Week. I'm very privileged to have the chance to talk to you. So I studied law at university, completed my degree in 2011. I've been a government lawyer for about 11 years. I've spent my whole legal career in GLD. So I completed my law degree, skipped away thinking, thank goodness that's over. I definitely don't want to be a lawyer. This is not for me at all. I think I was kind of under the impression that there were quite a limited range of roles that I would do with my law degree. And I was kind of pushed to, it would be magic circle, kind of city law firm, or it would be high street practice, and neither of them appealed. So I went off and I went and worked in the charity sector for a few years after I graduated. Little bit by little bit, I kind of ended up doing more kind of governance and quasi-legal work with the charity group that I was working with. And then a friend suggested to me that I might be kind of interested in government legal department, because I've always been interested in politics and kind of the public sector. I applied on a whim, not recommended, but it was the only law firm I applied to. I was a bit surprised when I got in, and I've been here about 11 years since then, and no plans to go anywhere anytime soon. So when I got in, I did my training contract with a government legal department. So they took me in, they funded me to do my legal practice course, which I did on a sort of accelerated basis and started the following September. As all of our new lawyers do, I spent 2 years training here, 6-month rotations between different parts of our work. And then for the next 4 years, we operate a scheme where you move twice. You spend 2 years in an advisory role and 2 years in a contentious role. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So is it possible to tell us a bit about the type of work that you do now? I don't know if there is such a thing as a typical day, but what sort of work do you do in your role now?
Absolutely. So it might help if I give you kind of a bit of sort of overview and structure of how government legal department works. So to try and minimise the number of acronyms, government legal department is part of the government legal profession. We are the main department that provides legal advice to government. Within the profession, there are a couple of other departments who have their own legal advisors, say HMRC and the Foreign Office, because of the kind of specialist nature of the work that they do. Their lawyers sit outside a government legal department. But by and large, GLD represents all of government. And we are broadly split into 4 different career pathways. So we have litigators who deal with litigation and inquiries. We have advisory lawyers, which is the role that I'm in at the moment. We have commercial and employment specialists as well. And there is quite a lot of fluidity in terms of how we move around. So I have been both a litigator and an advisory lawyer, not just when I was training, but those are different roles I've done post-qualification as well. But by and large, we kind of fall into one of those 4 pots. It's not really about whether you're a solicitor or a barrister, whether you've qualified in different ways. We do the same role. It's about the type of department that you're based with at that time. So I am currently a senior lawyer permanently seconded to the Ministry of Justice, which means I have an advisory role, and my role is essentially supporting end-to-end policy development by the Ministry of Justice. So I work with policy colleagues and ministers when they are developing proposals for new policy to identify any legal issues that they throw up. So issues like whether they have the right powers to do what they want to do, are there human rights, equalities, constraints on that? Back in the day, I'd have been advising on whether it was compatible with EU law. I'd look at international law compliance. I will advise them on process issues like whether they have a duty to consult or whether there are particular parameters to how they can make those decisions. So ultimately, it's about making sure that my policy colleagues and then our ministers understand the parameters of the options they're considering, and they can properly appreciate the legal risk of the different options they're considering when they develop policy. Then I support the implementation. So part of my role is also drafting the actual legislation that gives effect to whatever ministers have decided and supporting the parliamentary passage of that legislation. So there's a lot of working with ministers, with Parliament. My particular role, I have kind of two hats. So I support the government's policy on adults who lack capacity. And I also support the digitisation of the court and tribunal system. They're not related, but part of working in GLG is that you often pick up different roles. And part of that variety is what makes it so interesting. And in both of those roles, actually, I also work quite a lot with the judiciary. So I work with the judicial committees that look at how court practice and procedure works for those areas as well. So I kind of, on a day-to-day basis, there's some parliamentary input, some judiciary input, and input with ministers. So kind of understanding the balance and structure of all of those kind of different powers within the kind of constitutional framework. I manage a couple of junior lawyers. So a big part of my role is kind of developing them, quality assuring what they do. And as a senior lawyer, my role is often a bit more kind of relationship management. So I actually spend a lot of time, not so much doing the legal advice, but working with my clients to identify where there is a risk in one area that might relate to something else somewhere else, and making sure we're joining up those links and understanding competing priorities and making sure that our work is flowing across the whole department rather than just on a sort of individual isolated piece of work. So in terms of it, there isn't an absolutely typical day. I mean, I'm office based and I work 4 days a week, so I have a day off with my young family. But to give you a kind of a flavour of the kind of things that I'm doing. So the things that are in my inbox today are, first of all, I'm supporting and project managing the launch of a new digital possession service. So claims for possession, enabling those to be delivered via a new digital court process rather than the current system of kind of paper filing. So I'm working with colleagues to draft the new procedural rules for that, look at how we're going to roll it out, make sure that we're managing procedural fairness and how we stagger and lead the engagement on getting that new system up and running. I am supporting drafting a new code of practice, which is the statutory guidance that supports individuals working with vulnerable adults to how to assess whether or not they have mental capacity, how to support them to make decisions, or if need be, how to make decisions on their behalf. So there is a code, it's not been updated in nearly 20 years. We're working through understanding the case law and how kind of the wider legal framework's changed in the last 20 years to make sure that the code of practice reflects the latest position. I am supporting the Ministry of Justice to intervene in a Supreme Court case about whether and when doctors need court authority before they can switch off somebody's life support machine. And I am giving some advice to part of the court system on what it should be doing to verify whether the funds it's holding on behalf of litigants are owed to parties who are subject to international sanctions.
Wow.
So it's quite a broad portfolio.
Yeah.
We are generally in GLD, we're not subject matter specialists, we are generalists, and our skill is in understanding public law and in appreciating risk. So as you'll see, I can't possibly be a specialist in all of those different areas. And part of my role is kind of understanding where we need more input, but looking at those kind of holistic issues and identifying where ministers need to focus their attention.
Thank you. That is fascinating. And as you say, just a huge range of different sort of specialism and areas there, which, yeah. So kind of drawing on that, what sort of skills, qualities, attributes would you say you need, or government lawyers need?
So potentially controversially, I think legal knowledge is really important, but it is not the key thing. As I say, we are more generalists than we are specialists in particular subject matter, which I think is one of the key differences from actually what I've seen colleagues in private practice. I think the career progression in private practice tends to be you get really good at something, and you get more and more and more specialist as you get more senior, whereas we are almost the opposite, that as you get more senior, you cover more areas and you become less and less specialist in the range of stuff that you're supporting.
Right.
So where our legal knowledge comes in more is actually more about understanding how to calibrate and weigh up risk, and how to spot the kind of red flags that something just feels wrong. And so how to understand when you need to dive in and suggest that something needs more attention. There are kind of cross-cutting areas that we use all the time, skills in interpreting legislation, in understanding powers, in understanding human rights, for example. But they're there to have that kind of broader application and, you know when something just smells wrong. So the key skills for me are probably less about specific legal knowledge and more about how we conduct ourselves. So really, really big parts of my role are relationship building. So I spend a lot of time working with either with policy colleagues or across Whitehall to try and navigate, how do we unlock a problem? Have we got different departments who've got different competing policy objectives? How are we going to reconcile those? How are we going to prioritize what are usually quite scarce resources? How are we going to navigate dynamics with stakeholders on particular policy, and how does that inform our kind of risk approach? Lots about communication skills, understanding what your audience need to know and what they care about. It's actually quite rare these days that I write a long piece of advice like you do when you're a student and you've got your essay question and you write, several paragraphs to answer that. More often than not, on a day-to-day basis, I'm in a meeting or someone's grabbed me in a corridor or sent me a quick email, and what they want is a quick, can I do it? And the answer is almost inevitably more nuanced than yes or no, but they want that something quite short. And if you're saying no, they want to know what your alternative is. So communication, there's a lot about understanding where people are trying to get to and how to really land your point in a very short space of time. And then project management. I run a lot of projects, drafting projects, policy projects. So there's a lot of managing deadlines and keeping on top of making sure things are progressing in the way that they need to kind of get through those processes.
Great, thank you. So interesting. You're saying about it's not just about legal knowledge, but about, as you say, project management, about teamwork, attention to detail, I'm guessing as well, in terms of drafting, making sure that you're reflecting what it is they want to achieve. What would you say you enjoy most about your role?
I love my job. I've been here for a really long time and I hope they don't make me leave anytime soon. I really enjoy the variety of the stuff that I do. I don't think it would have suited my personality to become increasingly specialist in one area. I really like the kind of constant challenge of switching hats and kind of constantly learning and constantly building up experience in different areas of law. I have always loved the degree of responsibility that you get at quite an early stage with GLD. You have, because the public sector is not abounding in resources. From a very early point in your career, you're making the call on stuff. You are supported to do that, and it's an incredibly supportive environment. But it's you doing stuff. So I was taking a judicial review of one of our flagship policies for the department I was in at a time, through to the Supreme Court when I was a year post-qualification, because it fell in my area. And I had support from more senior people, but it was my area, it was my litigation, and so I was doing it. Whereas I think maybe in other areas, there's a lot more of that kind of sense of you're building up your skills at kind of the bottom of the rung, and you have to do a lot more stuff kind of before you get to really own that stuff for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really supportive culture. It's a really supportive culture in terms of your professional development, but it's also a really supportive culture in terms of individuals. We place a huge amount of value in kind of bringing your whole self to work and creating an environment where everybody is welcome and included, and it is genuinely a really nice place to work most of the time.
That's great to hear. I mean, you talked a lot about working with quite a wide variety of stakeholders, and you're managing politicians and their expectations, and judiciary. Is that challenging, or are there other challenges as well?
Yes, some politicians are notably more challenging than others. Some members of the judiciary are more challenging than others. And there have definitely been meetings where I felt like I need to bite my tongue more than I'd really like to. Yeah. But actually those kind of human interactions are actually part of what, for me, make the job most interesting. But they are definitely something that it takes a bit of time to get used to. And it's a bit of a lifelong practice, kind of learning how to land your message with very busy, very senior people who are not used to being told no. I was going to give you a really flippant answer, which is, having spent a ridiculous amount of time this morning trying to print my notes for this session, and even longer trying to find a stapler. If you want really flashy tech and infrastructure and really nice office buildings, the public sector is not the place to go. But I think at a more kind of concrete level, the things that I find most challenging are probably the resourcing. There's just kind of never enough of it. So you do have to get comfortable with doing something that's good enough. It's rare that you can really kind of go to town. You can often see the level of service and answer that you want to give to a question, and you have to kind of settle for something that's a little bit less than that, because time is pressing and you're pulled in a few different directions. So getting comfortable with that good enough rather than perfect. And the fact that we have a really important constitutional role, but we have to respect the democratic mandate. We are not decision makers. We are supporters to ministers. And that's a great privilege. But there are times when you are implementing decisions that you don't personally agree with. And that can be quite challenging to kind of decompress it at the end of the day. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So if for our students, if they were thinking of applying for maybe sort of vacation scheme or a training contract, what tips would you give them for sort of applying and maybe preparing for interview? What are the things that would help them stand out?
Okay, so I can talk a little bit about what our kind of different routes are into GLD, if that would be helpful. But in terms of particularly putting out your kind of application and interview advice, I think there's some tips which will stand you in good stead wherever you're applying. So for an interview, practice your key points, but don't practice your answers. It is so common, and I've interviewed quite a few people, and I've seen this so often, that people answer the question that they've prepared to answer rather than the question you've actually asked them. And it is so frustrating, because they've got all the right stuff to say, but they're just not actually addressing the question that you've asked. So a really good tip for interviewing for me is think about the kinds of things that you might be asked about. And for me, I drop down like 2 or 3 bullets, which are my thoughts on what the key principles are for that question. And I get those principles in my head, but don't practice a verbatim response. Because when you've got too used to saying it in a certain way, you'll trot that out, even if it's not actually what you've been asked to give the interviewer. So it's definitely got to be a genuine dialogue. But that said, it is worth hearing yourself back. Last time I did an interview for this role, I talked to myself and recorded voice notes and then listened to them back. And it was terrible. It was awful. I couldn't believe how hesitant I sounded and how waffly. You might be thinking the same right now. Hold your tone. But hearing yourself back, things just sound different to how they sound in your head. And actually, if you can, have a little dummy run where you try and answer some questions and listen to yourself afterwards, it's quite a useful exercise. Get other people to look at your applications, get as much feedback as you can. Don't be shy. And don't overlook the obvious in your answers either. So I think sometimes it's easy to kind of think that the examples that you have to give have to be really shiny, or they have to be kind of super examples of I did this massive pro bono project, or I did, particularly legal experience to get the examples that you want to show in your application. And that's helpful and that's great if you've got it. But like I've said, I think for our role, those kind of skills of communication, relationship building, project management are as important, if not more important, than the actual legal skills you've got. So examples from anywhere can be relevant if they're showing those skills. I think we might come on to talk a little bit about AI, but the AI is also going to massively change what skills we need of our lawyers. And brute legal knowledge is not necessarily going to be it anymore. It is going to be those more kind of human skills of, risk, assessing risk and communication and so on. This might be more specific to GLD applications than other areas, but the last thing that I would say is, if you can, give yourself a formula for any legal advice that you're going to give in an interview. This sounds a little contradictory to my saying don't practice your answers too much, but we tend to interview people by giving them a scenario and asking them to provide some advice on that scenario. We almost for a entry level role for a training contract, we won't expect any particular legal knowledge. In fact, we usually make the law up completely so that you have no advantage if you've got any particular legal knowledge in that area. We're asking you to spot issues. That said, it can be quite difficult when you've got a big scenario and there's like 100 different things you could say about it, to then channel that in a time-limited interview environment into some advice. So I would go in with a checklist of what questions are you going to ask yourself about that scenario, and in what order are you going to answer them. I actually still use this every day when I'm asked a question on a particular new policy area. So I have my mental checklist of, do you have the power? Is there a process duty? Is there a rights issue? Is there an international issue? And it just gives me a way to kind of structure my points. So who's going to challenge? What's the remedy if you are challenged? It doesn't need to be particularly elaborate, but just some kind of order in which you're going to ask yourself those questions so that you can really easily translate, okay, what are the big issues? What are the small issues? How do I translate that into an answer on the page? If you want a starting point, we produce a document called Judge Over Your Shoulder. You can Google it. It's in the public domain. It's a document of advice that we prepare for non-lawyers in government about a kind of it's kind of like an idiot's guide to public law. So it's got some really basic summaries of what public law is and what kind of things they need to think about when they're making policy. But somewhere in there, it used to be page 54, it might have changed, is a flow chart of how to make a lawful decision. And if you are applying to anything like GLD or public sector, use that flow chart. Just make that your structure in your crib sheet. And if you go through that flow chart, you'll have answered everything in the scenario.
Wow. Wow, that's so constructive. Thank you. I'll have a look at it myself. So presumably you don't get assigned to that scenario before you're into the interview.
No.
Yeah, fair enough. Fantastic. That's some excellent, really helpful advice there. Thank you. And you said, are there ways of getting some work experience? Are there vacation schemes?
We have a couple of limited work experience opportunities. So the first one is our diversity summer scheme, which runs each July for about a week. It's focused on opportunities for people who come from groups that are underrepresented in the legal profession. But you'd spend a week with us working on different kind of mock exercises, interviews with senior lawyers as a buddying system throughout the week. So you might be having a go at writing a bill, you might be having a go at advising a minister, and we'll kind of set up various different scenarios throughout the week. We don't take applications for that directly. We have several partner charities that we work with for that, and you need to apply via them. So rather than list them all out, Kate, maybe I'll give you the details afterwards and you can circulate them to participants. The other arrangement that we have specifically with the Open University is a mentoring programme for anyone who is doing the level 3 module Justice in Action. So if you sign up as part of that process, I think it's competitive, but you will be matched with a GLD lawyer for a period of mentoring throughout. I think it's January to June at the moment, but your tutors will be able to give you a bit more detail about that as well.
Yeah, I think JP knows quite a lot about that, don't you, JP, I think?
I manage that for W360, Hannah. So
it's,
we usually give students the option. We're in discussions at the moment with changing the time scales of it, so it might change from January to June, so it fits in more with other people that are being mentored. But if you're thinking of registering on W360, then you'll be sent details about how to join that scheme. Okay.
Yeah, Hannah's just responded in the chat there. It's called Judge Over Your Shoulder. So I guess if you put that into Google, Hannah, is that right? You should be able to find it.
Yeah, you should be able to.
And the flow chart is on there, page 54, I think you said.
Well, it used to be. They might have changed that, but it's in there. It's in there and it's really helpful.
Thank you. Excellent. Right. Well, I think I've asked all the questions I had initially. I have some more, but I'm sure I can see already we've had some questions in the Q&A, so I will start asking those. Several questions from Anik. I think I've asked about the biggest challenges of working as a government lawyer. He's asking us how they differ from private practice, which is quite difficult, I imagine, for you to answer because you haven't worked in private practice. So, but you have touched on sort of some of the frustrations of lack of resourcing and so on.
I think the biggest difference for me is that breadth is expected rather than specialism.
Yeah.
The other, for me, it's a perk. For others, it might not be. Is that I don't have to go out and get business. I have got one client, and they are guaranteed forever. So there's none of that kind of going out to tout for new service.
Actually, that's a very interesting observation, isn't it? Because I know some students find that quite daunting, that idea of sort of marketing yourself as well and devoting some of your time to actually bringing the clients in. So that's an interesting observation.
In legal terms, there is also a privilege that we have that a lawyer in private practice is never going to have, which is if we really don't like the law, we can think about changing it. So obviously that is a power that has to be, there's a lot that goes into that kind of decision-making process. But that does create a kind of a really kind of unusual blue sky space for government law that you don't have anywhere else, I think. And it does often put us like really at the cutting edge of stuff and what can be done and what cannot be. I'm not saying this is a great example, but you know, you can have conversations like, well, if the court has said Rwanda's not a safe space, what if we just brought in a bill to say that it was? And the legal analysis that goes behind that is in a slightly different league in terms of constitutional kind of issues. But that I'm giving that as an example of the kind of thing that you just have options and levers and creativity to think about that you wouldn't have in private practice.
That's very thought-provoking. Thank you. I noticed Helen had her hand up, but you've put it down again. Helen, did you want to ask a question?
No, it was a mistake. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay, no worries. Right, well, I'll go back to the Q&A then, and I think at the moment, yeah. Oh, I'll take one from Roberta. Hang on, so I'm just trying to see. There's some in the chat as well, so I'm sort of flicking a bit between the two. Roberta saying, you mentioned routes into GLD and training work experience. Is there a route through paid work, like starting as an administrator and climbing up as you qualify?
Yes, there absolutely is. So we have apprenticeship programs for our paralegals, and some of our paralegals also qualify through the SILEX route as well. You can also apply to our graduate solicitor apprenticeship route as well, which rather than our training contract, which is a sort of 2-year program to become a solicitor or barrister, if you go, it's 2.5 years if you go through that route, but you can apply through civil service jobs. And yeah, you will be working and studying towards your qualification on the job.
Studying on job, excellent. Good, so quite a few different routes really then. Interesting, thank you for the question, Roberta. I'll go back to the Q&A, see what else was there. Anika asked about your motivations for pursuing a career, which I think you did sort of explore. You know, that somebody obviously tipped you off to sort of thought it might suit your personality, and it obviously that variety of work seems to.
It did. I mean, the motivator for me is that I am fascinated by and really committed to public service and public policy. So this was the only place I applied because it was the public policy more than the law, if I'm honest, that really interested me. But now that I'm here, the lawyers do have a genuinely unique and fascinating role as part of that process. But the fact that you are tangibly advising on things that have a real world impact is terrifying and brilliant.
Yeah, it's a level of responsibility then, isn't it? Thank you. Right, and then what else? Nick's asked. Yeah, and Nick's asking about the impact on society. What does that look like in practice? Well, presumably if you are making law, have you seen that happen? Yeah, you've made law and seen that being implemented, and is there a sense of reward there, satisfaction, or?
So the first piece of legislation I ever made was to change the percentage of payments to change the amount of payments that are given to sufferers of mesothelioma, which I very proudly took my piece of legislation home and showed my parents, and my dad looked at it and went, gosh, your job is quite boring, isn't it? So sometimes the impacts aren't that exciting. But yeah, I mean, I have been extremely proud of some of the work that I've done, and I've been extremely uncomfortable about some of the other work I've done. I think the impact is always very tangible, and depending on your political stance and those of the government that you're serving at the time, you may or may not be happy about how tangible your impact is. Yeah, that's quite a unique challenge, I think.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I worked in private practice, and sometimes even in private practice you get clients who want you to do things that are engaged in business that you don't necessarily particularly approves, maybe it's too strong a word, but yeah, so it's like different, but in some ways there's some parallels as well. So
I think in any kind of advisory role there is a difficulty that your job is to advise and you don't make the decision, and sometimes that's really comforting and sometimes less so. Sometimes you want that control, don't you?
Yeah. Absolutely right. And Annick's also asked, what distinguishes a strong candidate for a role in government legal work compared to someone applying to a commercial law firm? So, Annick, I don't know if you want to actually come on the mic then, just clarify. Are you sort of saying what's particular qualities make you suitable for a government role? That I don't know if you want to just clarify there. I don't know if you can answer that, Hannah.
I think a lot of the skills and qualities that... Oh, yes. Hi, Annick.
Hi. Sorry, I had a problem with my microphone.
It's all right.
But the question is because I'm trying to understand the difference between commercial law. So that's why I asked the question, because I found it a little bit confusing. That's the reason.
Right.
So because it's my first year in the law, so I'm trying to understand most of the term that's been applied. And I think it was yesterday presentation we were talking about commercial awareness, everything. So
Okay.
I've been follow a gentleman who also doing multi things, and they do talk a lot about commercial. So I'm a bit confused about it. So that's why I asked this question, trying to see the difference between the commercial law firm and the government. What's actually the difference?
Yeah. Okay. So that commercial we talk about core points of commercial awareness. Is that something that is relevant to your role? Would you say, Hannah, in the same way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think just before I jump in, I think to clarify, I'm going to be talking about the difference between public sector law and private working for a private legal firm, rather than about commercial law or not, because we do just to add a layer of complexity, we do have some commercial lawyers within government who do government's commercial work, like procurement and licensing and contracting, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So obviously understanding of commercial law is really important for their role. I think most of the skills, Annick, are the same: relationship management, communication, project management, legal knowledge relevant to the area that you're advising on. I think for my role day to day, commercial awareness isn't really relevant, but political awareness is. So you maybe kind of substitute one for the other. So the factors that weigh on my judgment and understanding of what my clients need are usually more political than they are money based. Money comes into it, but the politics of that are probably what's the main prism through which I'd look at stuff.
So understanding your clients' objectives, whatever they may be, whether it's in a commercial sort of context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Thank you. And thanks, Annick, for those questions. Oh, I can see some new posts, so I'll go up. So question from Yannis. Do you find the work, that's an interesting question. Do you find the work to be emotionally or mentally taxing? For example, are you often going home thinking about work?
That is such a good question. Yes. But also that's kind of because I also like it. So I find it, I don't find it very easy to leave a question unresolved and park it till the next day. I tend to kind of chew stuff over. So that's partly a personal response rather than a general one. Yeah, I think it does depend a bit on your personality type. I think some of the work that we do can be quite emotionally taxing. Um, some of my colleagues have made a whole career out of working for departments where their role is a bit more removed from a kind of human impact. So I have colleagues who are fabulous advisors at dealing with regulatory regimes, for example, and, you know, kind of dealing with how we regulate companies and that kind of thing. And I kind of always feel that that might be easier to have a bit of detachment from. I tend to gravitate to the departments and the roles that have quite a lot of human content. So, for example, the role I'm doing at the moment about vulnerable adults. I've also worked for DWP on kind of operating and designing the benefit system. I like those roles because I really get a buzz from doing stuff that's got genuine people attached. But the flip side of that is I do find it a bit more emotionally taxing.
Great answer to a great question. Thank you. Just sort of on that as well, how easy is it to have the work-life balance?
I think we try and be a really flexible place to work. So I have a very young family. I have just come back from maternity leave from my second. I work 4 days a week and I have quite a lot of discretion to manage my hours to make sure that I'm doing the work that I do, but also I can, you know, deal with family life and so on. And yeah, there is quite a lot of flexibility with that. I think you might find anywhere that since COVID, we are less good at keeping to defined work hours. And so part of the discipline of going into any practice now, I think, will be learning to build in a bit more rigid, you know, be responsible yourself for your work-life balance, because now that people can work from home and they can log on and off at any point in the day, I very rarely log off and I come in and someone hasn't emailed me about something, even if I logged on quite late or started quite early. So it's up to me when I work. And 5-10 years ago, I'd have been contacted between 9 and 5. Now it could be any time, and I don't have to respond straight away. But I need a little bit more self-discipline to know when is my work time and when is my other time. And I think that's probably the case everywhere these days.
I think that probably is increasingly true, isn't it? And kind of setting your own boundaries as well. Something we're not always very good at, but some of us better than others.
So we don't have a culture where we expect people to work long hours for the sake of it. Equally, there is always a lot to do, and the government is very good at finding a crisis. So yeah, that self-discipline kind of comes in to know when you've done enough.
Thank you. And Nina was asking about the links to the Diversity Summer School, and John Paul has posted, thanks John Paul, a link there, so that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any more questions from students? I think we've dealt with the ones in the Q&A and chat. Do speak now though, there's still time. Whilst people may, hang on, I'll just double check I haven't missed anything. I think I've picked them all up. While people maybe are thinking, just to return to the AI, the thorny, and I know you're fairly recently back after maternity leave, and it's probably all kind of exploded since. I mean, how do you feel it's going to impact? Can you see, or is it still settling and stabilizing? And
I think AI is going to have a massive impact, and I don't know if I am fully qualified to quantify what that impact is going to be. Within government, we are definitely still getting our heads around what we can use it for and what we're comfortable using it for and what we're not. In my role with the courts, we are having a lot of discussions at the moment about how AI is changing how people litigate. We've seen in a really short space of time a massive increase in people using AI to plead their cases, for example, some of which has really great access to justice benefits, and some of which is quite dangerous, you know, people citing cases that just don't exist, or AI hallucinating the evidence that's been put forward. So there's some massive challenges there about how you operate the rule of law in an AI world. In terms of careers, I think it is going to be tricky in quite a lot of sectors at an entry level, because if you think about the kind of tasks that a few years ago would have been the bread and butter of people who are training and building up their skills, the kind of legal research and the drafting and that kind of thing, those are the tasks that's most easy to get AI to do for you. And I think we're going to need to think as an industry about how we change how we train people. But as I say, I think the key skills that you actually need to make a successful career in law are actually the ones that AI can't reproduce for you. It's relationship management. It's how do you weigh up risk? AI can identify that there is a risk because the large language models can flag that people have talked about XYZ risk before, but it can't weigh it. It can't decide what the balance of evidence is. It can't decide whether one point is more important than another. Those skills, the communication, obviously AI can write for you, but it can't understand how your audience is going to hear it. It can't get under the skin of what is it that they really want to know, what are the most important points that I need to land with them. And project management, it can't do. So I think there is something about preparing yourself by focusing on what are the macro skills that I need to develop, particularly that AI can't do. But actually, I think there is quite a good overlap between those being the skills that make a really good lawyer anyway. And as you're kind of starting to work through your career, like really honing in on those and maybe worrying about those skills more than you worry so much about whether you're a subject matter expertise in XYZ area.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really helpful. And John Paul has posted a link there to some free AI courses that have been prepared by colleagues in the OU, which help you to think about some of the issues that Hannah's touched on. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to engage with those. I've done the first one, which is really good. And yeah, I think just to encourage you also, if you haven't enrolled on W360, which Hannah mentioned earlier, we have opportunities on modules like that to engage with project work, to develop some of those skills that Hannah was talking about: project management, group work, communication. So if you haven't enrolled on W360, you may want to think about that. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Hannah. Any other questions? I appreciate it's a lovely day out there. You may want to be getting out and enjoying the sunshine, but if there's anything else, do raise it now. Neen, I can see your hand is raised. Do you want to use your mic?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
It's more a question for you, Kate, actually.
Oh.
So sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry, Hannah. I mean, your work sounds amazing. It's just up my street, just having that diversity of work life. But I wanted to ask you, Kate, I've already enrolled in W360. And I know when I was doing the application, it asked you to put your preference. So I just took random on what I think I would enjoy, not realizing there would be an element that would be able to work with somebody in the government legal department. Is it possible to change that option, or how will that work going ahead?
Are you talking about the mentoring scheme?
Correct. Yeah.
John Paul, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, that is an extracurricular thing that we offer to students that are on the project, and sometimes we offer it to students that are on other level 3 courses as well. So don't worry about that. That's not part of your project choice. That will be something that when the module starts, we'll ask you if you want to get involved in it.
All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. I think so. Yeah, I think probably we can draw things to a close. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's been really interesting to hear, just about the breadth of work that you're doing and all the sort of different areas that you touch on, and that whole issue of sort of risk awareness and risk management is fascinating. So maybe it will have made some of you think again about what career you might be thinking about pursuing. And yeah, do check out some of the resources that Hannah's recommended as well. Should we give Hannah a warm virtual applause if you can, using our react button at the top there? There's a well,
Thank you for having me.
Yes, for pleasure. I can see Roberta's raised her hand. Are you okay to take one more question?
Of course.
Okay.
Oh, she
Roberta,
put it
do you
down. I
want
think
to-
she might have been done. Roberta,
she may have been trying to do the clap.
maybe.
Yeah, it's easily done.
It's worth saying as well, I don't know if you mentioned Hannah, but anecdotally, we have lots of sort of people saying that Open University students have been very successful in joining the government legal department and government legal professions and things. So might not be something that you know about necessarily, but apparently so.
So my stats on this are quite old. But yes, I think couple of years ago, I'd have said I agree with you. I think you're in our top 5 universities. I don't know if that my stats are a couple of years old, but you've definitely, I've definitely got colleagues here who have come through the Open University, and I think it's been a really good training ground. So go for it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think we'll draw things to a close. Thank you, everyone. It's I hope you found this Employability Week helpful. And as JP says, that we will be hopefully putting up some recordings in due course of those sessions, particularly those you weren't able to attend. So thank you so much. Do feel free to go and enjoy the sunshine, and
I'll stop the recording.
Thank you.
thank you.